God is good, and each day that passes brings us closer to the launch of the game we're all waiting for, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing if you're interested in Pantheon-related content. That's what we do here at the NAPALM channel. Moving on, though, today I wanted to discuss something that was brought up in a recent interview with MMORPG.com, in which they briefly touched on endgame. Okay, real quick, let me play that clip.
Raid content from the very beginning. For me personally, I was an MMO gamer before I was a developer.
Right.
And I was an MMO gamer for a really long time, and so I've experienced firsthand that sense of launching with a game, diving in, leveling at a competitive pace, and then getting to end game and realizing there's just absolutely nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there is something to do, it's usually tacked on and hanging by a thread, and you break it, every time you touch it, and it just seems really, kind of second thought or whatever. And we have already, with that in mind, we started our whole world building process with the commitment to have 3 raid zones defined and conceptualized and planned and gone through pre-production and all those things from the beginning. And that's a raid zone, not just an encounter, but zones, full zones that are devoted to raid content with, of course, several points of that kind of apex raid encounter within them. And that's something that we're committed to, and it's something that when Pantheon launches, I could list the names if I wanted to, but there's already 3 raid zones planned, conceptualized, and going to be ready for players to tackle. And then staying on top of that is going to be really important as well.
All right, so basically what we can gather from that is a few things. Number one, that being that this isn't the first rodeo for Brad McQuaid or Chris Perkins / Java, because they have done this before, and because they're actual MMO players, they know exactly what happens when we get to the end game, right? And there's nothing to do. Or there's a couple of things to do that are end game, raids and things, but they're broken. They don't work correctly. That's kind of almost normal these days. So what they're focusing on is that from the beginning, they planned these raids, okay? They planned them from the conceptual design of the world and geography and the game. So they're not tacked on. They're not something like they built the world, they built the story, and then they tack on these couple of encounters, okay? And that's the other thing. It's not just 3 raid encounters, which to me would be healthy for an instanced-based MMORPG. Any MMORPG on the market right now, you could say, that would be acceptable, right? 3 different raids you can do at launch. And then we'll get more in patches and subsequent expansions, etc. But that's not what they're doing with Pantheon. They're doing 3 raid zones. So entire zones dedicated to raids. So each one will have different components, different raid bosses, different areas that you have to travel through to get to the raid boss, and all that, okay? Now that's necessary though, because Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is not an instance-based game, so therefore they have to have these huge zones with a lot of things going on in them and a lot of different activities, alright? So for those who are not familiar with how a raid zone works, okay, it's not like you're thinking as in when you go to a raid, you go to this specific instance and you go from beginning to end, okay? A raid zone normally will have a place where people meet up, alright? Sometimes maybe the developers of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen will have a specific area designated for that with things that you might need to prepare yourself, where your raid group can meet up and get the supplies they need, etc., etc. Maybe they will. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll leave it up to the player to decide, what area is the safest place to meet, and maybe there'll be different hubs and areas for them to meet, near each encounter or near each beginning of each raid activity, okay? But regardless, it's an entire large field, I guess you could say, filled with pockets of raid or top tier activity for end game experience, okay? So here's the problem. Alright, so the most common way to tackle open world raiding, which is what Pantheon Rise of Fallen has to have since it's not going to have instancing, okay? There's a few ways they can tackle this. The obvious answer would be, let's just make there be so much content that if a group or a guild decides to do this raid and it's already underway, then they can move on to another activity, because there just will be so much content that they can pick from as far as a raid goes, that, you know, they'll be alright. They can't do this one, so we'll just move over and do this other one, right? Well, that's not exactly going to be enough. Here's why. Number one, we don't know how many people are going to get to in-game and how fast. You don't know how many people are going to be actually raiding on the weekends. I think a lot. I think Pantheon's, because the game is built from the ground up to be difficult, I think a lot of people are going to be raiding. I think they're going to get good at the game. More people, when they get to the final level, are going to be really good at their class as compared to another game where you can literally face roll across the keyboard all the way to the max level, and then you have no idea how to play your character. That's not going to be the case in Pantheon. Unless somebody plays for you, then you know how to play that class if you've made it this far, because the game didn't hold your hand. It didn't make it easy for you. There's a lot of games that when they launched, they were hard. They were difficult. You had to know your class, and I know 99.9% of the people listening to my channel probably either didn't play or didn't like it or what have you, but at the launch of World of Warcraft, it was not easy to level up back then. You know, there wasn't a dungeon finder. There definitely wasn't a raid finder. The content itself has been nerfed a lot just to help people catch up to the end game, because that's where the fun is, right? So it's been nerfed heavily. Everything has in that game. It used to, you know, by the time you made it to max level, it took a long time back then at vanilla WoW, and you knew your class really well by then. You had to be good. You were playing with people on your server, for example. Another good example is Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. When it launched, the game was not easy. Some of you may have forgotten that, but it's been nerfed over the years. When A Realm Reborn launched, it was a hard game. You actually had each dungeon encounter. There was mechanics that you had to do all the way up into the end game. So by the time you got to end game, you had a basic idea of how the end game might work. Games aren't really, for the most part, built like that anymore. Even Final Fantasy XIV is not like that now. It's been nerfed. Everything's very easy. You can face roll through it, in my opinion. So, because Pantheon Rise of Fallen is challenging gameplay and group focused from the beginning, in other words, you're not just soloing through and killing 10,000 mobs per minute. You're actually having to group up from the beginning all the way to the end. There's going to be more high-tier players at the end. Pretty much anybody that makes it to the end will be capable of raiding. Now, whether they want to or not is up to them. So, I don't think there's going to be an easy solution as far as just saying there'll be so much to do in these 3 zones that we'll be able to, you know, get away with it. And it all be open world, okay? And I don't want you to think that I'm saying that Visionary Realms thinks that. I absolutely do not think that they even for 1 second believe that. They've been in the game too long. These aren't, these aren't noobs developing this game. They know how end game works. They know more about open world raid zones than anybody else, because that's how EverQuest was. So they know the problems. They know why it did work and why it didn't work. And they're going to fine-tune that. Now, what are they going to do to make it work? I'm not sure. That's what this video is all about. I wanted to talk about it and see what your opinions are, because every time I bring up a topic and I discuss it, you guys always come up with some really good theories or ideas. And, you know, the developers, I'm not saying they sit around watching my channel all day, but they do see my channel sometimes, and they do check out comments and things like that from the community. That's a huge part of their development. So if you throw out a really good idea, they might just use it. But anyway, what I'm thinking is, number 1, you have 3 zones. So you do have, they are opening up with a lot of raid activity, okay? A lot of different things to do, and that's cool. That's a start. Number 2 is going to come down to respawn timers. How often will it respawn? And they're going to have mechanics in place as far as the the development of the game and the way it's designed in order to prevent people from just continuously staying at that one encounter and doing it over and over and over and over and over and over until they get the drops for their entire guild. You know what I mean? Or what have you. That could cause a big problem. So they're going to have something like maybe, I don't know, a couple of ideas could be that each particular encounter can only be done, once per week, let's just say. I know some of you don't like the time-gated activity, but, I mean, there has to be some kind of restraints on an open-world raiding type situation. So, that would be one idea. So that a guild could get together, and in my opinion, these raid zones are going to be, it's not just going to be your one group. It's going to be several groups, in my opinion. You're going to be going out and doing this. So basically, your guild is going to go out and do this encounter. Get, whatever loot they just happen to get from that raid, and then that's it. Try again next week, right? That's one option, is making sure that it respawns maybe in a fashion for the next people waiting in line wanting to do it, but not so much for the people who are just finished it. It's over for them, right? So if they were to keep standing there, I guess they would just see another group attacking nothing, right? Because they already killed the encounter. Or they see it, they see the monster and they see the next group fighting it, but it's got a big blocked, you can't do this, you can't pull this anymore, you've had your turn already. Okay, that's another option. Another thing I've read people talking about is what if they did not instanced areas, but instanced encounters. Okay, for example, you're fighting a raid boss with your guild, you kill it, as soon as you pull it, you're now in your own, that mob is yours, okay? It belongs to you, but if another group that isn't part of your raid comes along, there's one for them to pull, right? They'd have to make sure the areas are big enough so it doesn't get too crazy and several groups fighting on top of each other and things like that. But do you see what I'm saying? Like that mob, now they have their own version of that mob. They have their own instance of that. Now they can see the other group over here fighting, because it is a shared world, and that's part of Pantheon's philosophy. But they also have one they can pull. That's another option they could do. I don't know the difficulty of doing that or how insane that might be. I don't know what that would do for lag, etc., but that's another option. That's something they could do. And I guess actually a better word for that would be phasing. They each group has their own phasing of what happened to their group. And since they're a part of that group, it's visible to them on their screen, but the other team that's not part of their group phases into another, what they see on their screen. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to make it make as much sense as I can. Another thing about open world raiding that is great is that, alright, anybody who does any kind of raiding or has ever done raiding knows that, you get your group, you plan it, whether it be on the same day at the same time every week, or maybe not, depending on the guild. They do different things. Some guilds just do an event, they announce it, and they gather up people. Maybe they write down a post-it note on right beside their keyboard or whatever. But when it comes the day and the time, there is people missing. People didn't show up. Well, the good thing about an open world game is if you don't have the kind of time to devote a specific day and time to, that's when you're going to raid like a static, then in an open world game, you could literally go to, let's say there are hubs where people meet up, and I really think Pantheon's going to do that. It just feels right for the development so far, to where there's these areas where, it's built and designed for people to meet up, it's safe, there's, whatever, maybe there's a local market board, whatever, let's get into another topic, but, it's just a good place to meet up, okay, and designed that way. So you could just go there because you have, you got the night free, you want to do some in-game content, you want to do something cool, you really don't even care what, you just want to get in a group and do something fun. So you go to one of these hubs near something cool you want to do, and you hang out and you wait for one of these groups, and they're tank didn't show up, and you're a tank, and, you know, they're asking around, is there anybody around who wants to do this with us? And there you are, and you can run off and go have some fun. And I think that's the spirit of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, is it because it's open, because it's community and group-based gameplay from the beginning, not just at the end of the game, but from the beginning it's been this kind of game. People are more open to do things like that. They're more open to say, hey, you, why not? You know, we need a tank, or maybe we just need another DPS, or we need a crowd control, whatever. Come with us, you know, let's go. Have you done it before? Do you know what we're in for? You know, and move along. So I think these are decent solutions. I think it could work that way. Now, when we get closer, and Brad McQuaid said, we're not really going to get to see even a portion, even a little tiny crumb of this kind of activity until we get into beta and or maybe alpha, but probably beta. And then we might get to see some of this. We might get to test it out, and you know, they're going to try to balance it out the best they can. Now, I do believe that there will still be a little bit of competition. You know, Pantheon's not really built to just be this easy for everybody. It's not a game built for everybody. This is going for a niche market, you know, and every part of the game, all the features are very niche so far. I think they're trying to be fair. I think they understand that some of us old school MMORPG players have a lot of responsibilities now and maybe don't have the time that we had back in 1999 when we lived at home and, you know, worked 20 hours a week and part-time and went to school. You know, we had more time to devote and things like that. We had less responsibilities. So they definitely know that. That's part of their philosophy. They talk about it all the time. So if you're one of those people and you're worried that you're not going to get to do the fun, cool stuff on a raid tier, I think you will. I think everything I just said, which is all speculative until we know more details, however, that would work for almost anybody. Now, you may go hang out at the hub all night. Nobody's doing that activity, you know? I mean, that's kind of the way these open world games work. But when you do get into one, when you do get to experience it, it's just that much better. It's just that much more memorable. You usually make really good friends. There's a lot of camaraderie, and it's just good gameplay. What do you guys think? Let me know. Do you like those ideas? Do you have a better idea? What do you think about it? Do you think it will work at all? Do you think it's even possible to do raid zones, open world, people raiding? I mean, is that something you think can be done? Have you done it before in the old EverQuest days? Tell me some of your stories, whatever you got, guys. But I think I've rambled on long enough. Thank you for watching. If you've not subscribed to my channel, please consider it, especially if you like Pantheon Rise, or if you're interested in old school MMORPGs. Just consider it, but if not, that's okay. I hope to see you next time on my next video. Thank you guys for all your support, and God bless and happy gaming.